Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, mostly ladies, yes. When someone does so well describing what it is you do and who you are, it really makes it difficult to fill the 5 minutes that you've been asked to do talking about yourself. But I'm going to try. My name is Otis Deley. It's a silent R. Not many people know that. It's a talking point. Take that home with you. I've been a host on the Gadget show now for 10 years. So in the same job for 10 years. So I might need to have a chat with one or two of you about, progressing and not being in the same position for too long. I have a fundamental love of science and technology, engineering and maths that was born from watching science fiction shows as a child. So anything from Star Trek to Space 1999, which only the really old people in this room will remember. Fueled a desire to then learn more about it, and I studied physics, chemistry and maths at A-level. And then went to university and studied pharmacy and was all set to be on the team that changed the way we interact with medicines and stuff, and then TV happened. And I realized in very short time that I like the attention that I get from being on stage and working in television. But what I've been fortunate enough to be involved in is STEM events at school level, trying to encourage young minds to get involved with all of that. And I've been to events like Big Bang and constantly asked what can be done to get more young people engaged in those subjects. And more recently, I've been invited to huge events where women are at the forefront of tech. I've hosted about 3 or 4 award ceremonies, which have all been very different, but at their core have been a celebration of the innovation, the creativity, and the unique mindset that women bring to that field. So if any of you were questioning why I'm qualified, that's it. I've hung out with smart women, and it's been great thus far. This panel that I'm going to host was originally sold to me as a fireside chat, something warm and cozy, and that was until I was told who the 4 behemoths of tech are who will be joining me here. So I won't talk much longer. We'll get things started. We're here to talk about what is going well or being done well in terms of increasing the visibility and contribution of women in the tech sector, and what more can be done. So I will take my seat and oh, I've still got a microphone. That's good. I won't have to shout. Please allow me to introduce the 4 women who will be coming up and joining me in this discussion. First of all, we have Professor Sue Black, OBE. She is a professor of computer science and a technology evangelist. She's a UK government advisor. She's up for women's equality. She's the Women's Equality Party candidate for London Mayor 2020. She's a professional speaker and author, and I've met her a few times. She is fantastic. Please give her a round of applause. Welcome aboard, take a seat. Next up, we have Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon, MBE. She is the visiting professor at Sunderland University. That's where I got my degree from. Yes! Except I've not been back since 1995, so it'd be interesting to compare notes. She's also the host of the Women Tech Charge podcast, founder of Stemettes, and the trustee at the Institute for the Future of Work. So please give a round of applause to Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon. You're welcome. Jacqueline de Rojas, CBE, is the president of techUK, chair of the Institute of Coding, president of Digital Leaders, and an advocate for diversity and inclusion. Welcome to the stage. And our final guest up on stage is Dorothee Schobert-Sargent, who is a managing director of Credit Suisse. Round of applause. Thank you. So, yeah, they are.
Did she ask for your consent before she took your images,
Actually,
audience?
No,
GDPR, JDR.
consent wasn't asked.
So dull.
So, the percentage of women in tech currently sits at a woeful 17%. Yet there are so many different initiatives to support women in tech, from school level right up to supporting senior women in their roles in tech. This is a question to each of you, actually. What do you think is going on? Is this a good percentage? Have we moved on a lot in the last few years? Why are we not moving the needle? What can be done to create a faster uptake? Sue first.
Hi everyone. Well, so I've kind of been doing stuff in this area for just over 20 years, and the percentage about 20 years ago was about 17%. And there's been all these initiatives over the last 20 years, still about 17%. So you could say nothing's changed, but actually everything has kind of changed at the same time. You know, like when I set up the UK's first online network for women in tech, BCS Women, in '98. And one of the comments I got around that time about setting up what I thought was a very exciting network for women in tech was, why are you ghettoising yourself? And I just thought, what? I thought, here I am doing what I thought was this really cool thing, connecting all these women together so we can all chat to each other. You know, maybe we don't meet up with each other when we go to tech conferences because there's, you know, like 17% women. So let me connect everyone together. It'll be really cool. And I got comments like, why are you ghettoising yourself? And I just thought, wow, you know, I'd not seen it from that perspective at all. I feel like now I don't get comments like that anymore. There's a ridiculous amount of amazing initiatives, you know, like Anne-Marie stuff that I'm doing. So many people now doing stuff around women in tech. So I think the whole environment has changed dramatically, really, really dramatically. Now businesses are talking about trying to hire women in tech, whereas 20 years ago they weren't really saying that. And so I would say the environment has changed a lot. I feel like we're kind of getting towards a tipping point. I feel like things are about to change dramatically, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. Anne-Marie, why do you think the needle hasn't moved as such?
So the needle has moved, and I think Sue kind of mentioned that a little bit, from going to 17, going down and coming back up again. So we're on the up, I'd say. We can be positive that we're moving in the right direction at the moment. And in terms of the stats, because the industry has moved so much as well in that time, 20 years, you know, there are lots of things that people are doing now that weren't roles 20 years ago. And so actually what we scope within technology, what we scope across STEM has changed, where, you know, that also accounts for some of the movement and some of the numbers that we've seen. I think my frustration, though, is that there's been a lot that's been done to improve the women and to prepare the women and to attract the women. And what we now need in this next phase for that change to catch and to remain is to improve the environment and make things better, and help the incumbents be better and be more welcoming of the people that they also need in their industry. So whether it's looking at harassment that we've got in the workplace, whether it's looking at recruitment practices that we have, whether it's looking at the promotion of those women when they're in those places, but even small things. So Caroline, I'm sure, mentioned it in her talk earlier, around what our norms are in our technical spaces. You know, I saw a tweet yesterday about master and slave, which is an interesting kind of set of terminology that we still have in the computer science world. But there are all these kinds of norms that we have where we need to be building the spaces where it's okay for you to be a woman in those spaces, okay for you to maybe have children, or for you to maybe have a period, or whatever it might be, where that's not something that's going to be frowned upon, it's not something that's going to get in the way of you thriving in these environments. And it's still something that I see now. It's funny you said you don't get that comment often. We got it in a meeting yesterday.
No.
Aren't you ghettoising? We don't want to have the women separated off because then they're all going to be separated off. Anyway, but it's something where I think for me, I'm encouraging girls. I'm kind of bringing these hundreds, thousands of young women into the industry, and I'm already seeing some of them saying, well, this is great, and I know technology is brilliant, but this is not the place I want to be in, which we're seeing now even with them in early career, let alone that kind of 10-year drop-off that we see. So lots has happened, lots to do. It's kind of unfinished business, really.
Jacqueline?
I don't know if you've left anything for me to say, really, but
Sorry.
no, I'm a technology optimist, and I think this is a good time to be a girl, for sure. I think you're absolutely right. The technology industry is so much bigger than it was, that we've got so many more women in the technology industry. I do think we need more role models at senior positions, and we need more leadership to create that environment and culture. Culture trumps strategy every time, so we need to make sure we're leading from the top. And, fish rots from the head down. So, we've really got to make sure that the leaders get it right. Otherwise, we aren't going to create a sustainable environment. What I will say is we do need to get them young, not 16 upwards, but much younger. I'm an ambassador for the Girl Guiding Association. We've got 500,000 girls in this country who are brownies and guides, and we've just created 12 new STEM badges. So, and that starts with, really important stuff like consent online, how do you stay safe, and then goes right up to AI and robotics. So I'm optimistic, I'm excited. I think there is a generational shift that's coming where I don't think they're going to take any of the shit that's come, that's already, we've had in our generations. I think they're not going to go there, excuse the language. And I'm sorry that's streamed, but just saying that, I think the next generation is not going to be as tolerant of the inequality that we have grown up with.
So you're talking about a real sense of empowering our girls and our young women to make that change themselves.
They're feisty, they're tough. Yep. They're not going to take it. So I think, look at them. I really think that absolutely there is going to be a sea change. And I think at events like this, the energy is palpable. The change is almost something that we can't ignore. And I think we really need to take advantage of that now.
Now, you said that initiating that change, has to come from above, so that as our youngsters are coming up through the ranks, they can see that it's possible, and they can take it on board and run with it, essentially. Dorothee, can you tell me what a company like Credit Suisse is doing internally to affect change?
Sure, and let me maybe also comment. I think, while the diversity rates and the tech industries are still very, very low, are the lowest ones across all industries, the change is here. I mean, just being at this event, seeing all of you here, when I studied electrical engineering over 20 years ago, I can tell you we wouldn't have even filled half of this room. So it is here. We need to continue doing what we're doing to foster the culture of inclusion and diversity, and need to have the role models in place so that we can all see that it is possible to achieve it. So from a corporate point of view, what we've been investing in is not just making sure that we can attract more women into the tech industry, that we can make sure that technology is seen as creative, and that we can manage the bias that still exists, as well as the culture that still exists to the tech world not being inclusive of diversity. So we've run several programs in order to improve the attraction into the world. We've gone into schools, we sponsor programs to help make technology attractive, and we also look at our recruitment practice to make sure that we have a lot of women that apply, because they see and they make decisions on when they apply for jobs in a very different way than males do. So rather than saying this is what I don't have, we want to make sure that everybody can come to the table and actually share what they can bring to the table, because the roles in the tech industry are so diverse and so interesting that there is a role for anyone that is looking for an opportunity in the tech world. So that's the one side on the recruitment side. But we've also worked quite a lot on providing networks internally, so that there is a peer community around, that you've got an internal network that you can ask questions on how you approach certain situations. There's a lot of situations in life where you do want counsel from somebody else, and we've built networks in order to foster that, and in order to empower women to take further career steps. supporting them throughout. So there's a lot happening within big organizations too that help you no matter where you're at your career, to help you on your journey through the tech world.
Anne-Marie, your organisation, Stemettes, tell us a bit about that, and what type of working relationship do you have with schools, and what can be done to improve the curriculum in order to increase even further the number of young women taking up the subject?
Oh my goodness, how long do you have? So Stemettes would be 7 in February. I used to work in the city in the technology role, and ended up speaking at the Grace Hopper celebration of women in computing, which if you haven't been, try and go. 25,000 women in tech all in one place at the same time over 3 days. It was first week of October, and it'll be the same next year. And ended up at this conference, and a bit like today, kind of, for me, having always been in technical things, always done maths and computer science, always been super technical, I'd never been in a majority female space, let alone a space that had so many technical women in one place. And it gave me a sense of belonging that I didn't know I needed. I learned I was a woman in tech, which up until that point I hadn't realised. And it kind of sparked something in me to say, well, why don't more girls feel a sense of belonging in technical places like this? Why can't more people feel this warm, fuzzy feeling in these kind of majority female technical spaces? So Stemettes, our ethos is that everything is free for the girls to attend, everything's fun for them to attend, and there's always food for those who attend, because everyone likes free food. And we work with girls aged 5 up to 25 to bring them into these environments. And it's across STEM, so it's science companies, engineering companies, maths companies, as well as technology companies, but we allow them to try these things out before they buy, and to make more informed decisions. We get them to meet role models, and it's not just Hall of Famers, it's everybody, all different types of people that have got all different types of backgrounds that are now working across STEM. And we allow them to build their confidence, build their awareness of what's happening or what's available, improve their perceptions of what it would be to be in STEM, but also then connect their network, because that's the other thing that, if you're someone who's growing up and you don't have that science capital, as they call it, if your parents don't have a STEM background, or if no one in their immediate group of friends has that as well, then you're less likely to go into it, because it's just what you've seen in The Matrix or IT Crowd or Big Bang Theory, or insert name of poor representation here. So we work with the girls to kind of change that a little bit, connect them up, and allow them to flourish really in that kind of space. It is about the creativity. It is also about the altruism. That's what we get them to see, because for a lot of people, that's their driver. It's not just about building something that's quicker, harder, faster, or stronger. It's about actually solving problems and helping people. And if you want to help people, technology is a great place to be. Even if you're an evil genius, technology is also a great skill to have. So, it's something for everyone. And in terms of schools, we've got a really interesting relationship with them, because the schools are under a lot of pressure at the moment. There's a lot going on. Even though we have teachers who are really keen and want to get involved with what we're doing, they don't always necessarily have the right senior leadership team, the right head teacher, the right things happening in their academy trust to get involved with what we're doing. So we tend to only really do 1/4 to 1/3 of our activities with schools. Most of it actually is wider community for girls who might want to have a look and try out, but their school teacher doesn't think they could do it. Or girls who really would have wanted to take computer science at school, but they don't offer it. So for us, we're able to kind of mop them up and bring them into our fold and into our community. But I think to go back to what needs to change in the education system, first off, we need lots more investment. The number of girls we have who are choosing science and are really good at science, but haven't had the same science teacher for longer than 3 months at any given time. And this is leading up to really key points like GCSEs and A-levels. That's happening across the board. We don't have enough physics teachers. There's all these things that we're missing. But even the curriculum itself is really dry. It's not very altruistic. They talk just about dead white guys, which, no offence to anyone who's a dead white guy, even on the live stream. But
I think we've got. I think we might have some in the audience
on the dead stream, like from the other side. But it's not just them that have done it. And so when we come back to this role models thing, if that's being drilled into you from school, then that means your teacher, your lecturer, your professor is able to say, well, this is only for white guys, and you're not one of them, so I don't think you're going to survive to the end of the year anyway. So there's quite a lot that needs to be changed, but ultimately we need the investment. Just because you change the curriculum doesn't mean it's something that will be implemented well for everyone across the country.
Is there a volunteering aspect to it? Could members of the audience get involved with Stemettes?
Yeah, there's volunteering, there's funding as well, aspects, there's all kinds of aspects, all kinds of ways you can get involved. I think we everyone kind of in this room understands the impact that a role model, a mentor, a sponsor, even being a judge at a hack could be. You're someone that looks like those girls that we've got. It's not even just about looks. So the number of girls we know who do jiu-jitsu and they connect with someone because they've got jiu-jitsu, or I even talk about, everyone has a way that they eat a Kit Kat, or they don't eat Kit Kats, right? And that's the thing that even people bond on because food is so important and we always have food. Yeah, that's where I was going with that. We have free food, come and volunteer. But there's lots of ways for people to get involved. I think even if it's not spending time with the girls, because teenagers are an interesting bunch of people to spend lots of time with. In the nicest way possible. Love you, girls. You could even write a letter to your teenage self. So there's lots of things to do to be that role model for girls and young women. But ultimately, funding is what we need to be able to run what we do across the country. It's not on favours. It's not on thin air. We have a team that goes and runs these things in schools and outside of schools. And for us at the moment, there's a big focus in these cold spots areas. So there are parts of the country, like Peterborough, like Teesside, where girls aren't picking STEM A levels and aren't choosing these paths. And I don't know how many of you want to be with me on the train for 3 hours or 6 hours next week to go to Teesside and come back. I mean, let me know if you do. But ultimately, we need the funding to kind of enable us to do those things in lots of different places.
Well, my geography serves correctly. Durham's not too far down the road from there.
Yeah.
So
Half
already
an
making
hour.
connections.
Half an
Love
hour.
it. Jacqueline, you're a known frequent user of hashtags, I'm told. In particular, not just London.
Thank God, I thought it was going to be something else.
Hashtag not just London and hashtag inclusion. So you're obviously passionate about inclusion in tech. Why is it important that not only we support women in tech, but a breadth of women from different areas around the country and from different backgrounds?
Well, I mean, because we do a lot in London, so we should share it. We are a whole community, not just, London. But I think we are reaching a point in technology where, and in the diversity conversation, where, of course, it's a noble cause that we should have equality. Get that. Totally agree. The second piece about diversity in tech is that it simply creates better outcomes when you have diverse teams. One woman on the board of a business reduces the risk of bankruptcy by 20%. Fact. But the third thing about tech is that if an algorithm is now going to decide whether you get a place at university, a job interview, or that mortgage, you have to be really clear about who's writing that technology. So picture this, a doctor was not able to access the locker room at the gym. And the techies came in because the swipe card was being swapped out, still couldn't get access to the gym. Turns out that the job title doctor is hard-coded as a male job title, and that's why she couldn't get into the locker room. Now, that's a very trivial example, but imagine if pilot had been hard-coded as a male job title and a 737 MAX plane fell out of the sky because female pilot couldn't override autopilot.
Yep.
It didn't happen, but just imagine.
Yep.
Point is, if we don't have diverse people writing our digital future, it will not be a world that includes everybody. And that's why it really matters more now than ever before, because algorithms, AI, machine learning is so prolific. It's learning to be more and more biased.
Yes.
So for me, there's nothing like a good crisis to sort things out. And this is a technology crisis/opportunity to create a world that works for everybody. And that's why I use hashtag inclusion and hashtag not just London.
It's great that you use the algorithm situation as an example. I myself have experienced infrared sensors or fingerprint sensors not working correctly because of my darker skin.
Wow.
And when looking into it, you find that the developers and those who are writing the code are, they're a team of white gents, and it's not always an intention to not include or think about those that don't look like you, but the AI does become biased.
And we all have bias.
Yep.
We all have it.
And even more recently, I think the Apple credit card had been accused of bias as well, because white dudes were getting the card, but white women weren't getting the cards.
Their wives who had the same accounts, same address, same everything.
Yep.
Everything
Same
joint
credit
finances
rating.
were getting is, I think, something a factor of 22 times less credit limit. What was interesting about that, though, is that the technology has been able to show up what was happening kind of already, because Apple kind of pointed and said, well, it was that bank people over there. And they were like, and it's like, okay, the jig is up now.
Data is our friend.
Exactly, right? You can't just rely on how things were. But it's the same thing where kind of if we look historically, things haven't been perfect, things haven't been inclusive. And so if you're training it on those data sets, you're
It's
only
training itself.
well, exactly. You're only going to get a magnification of the bad things that have already happened. So it's about having the right people in the room to say, well, actually, I'm a doctor, I'm a woman. We need to work that out on this algorithm.
So many questions. We are unfortunately running out of time, and then we're going to open questions up to the floor. So if you have any, there will be a microphone that comes round to you so that you can pose your question to our panelists. Before I open it up to the floor, it's clear that you've all been very successful in your careers. I would like to start with Dorothee. What would your top tip be to members of the audience in terms of driving their career in tech forward?
So my tip would be to focus on the value that you can bring to the equation to make sure that you can influence the future, and just go for the opportunity that is at hand. I think as females, we're always very good, as I said earlier on, about thinking where the gaps may be and where we still have lessons to learn. Just ignore those. Go for the opportunity and pursue them step by step. The journey is different for everyone, but do write your own story and make sure that you seize every opportunity and don't miss out.
Jacqueline.
I've got so many. So
Give us all of them.
Okay. So the biggest one would be to turn the volume down on the terrorist in your head. You know, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't say to my best friend the things I say to myself in terms of I'm not worthy, you're not worth it, all of those things. And I have learned over the years to find a way to turn the volume down. It doesn't go, but if you can find a way to turn it down, I think being kind to yourself is so important, because self-sabotage is perhaps one of the biggest things that gets in the way of women wanting to take the next step. Call it lack of confidence, whatever you like, but we do a lot of self-harm, and I really wish for everybody that we can find a way to be kinder to ourselves.
Mine is you need the Holy Trinity of coaches, mentors, and sponsors to grow your career. Many of you will have mentors. You can ask someone to be your mentor. The advice should be free. Don't pay them. That's not really how it works. A coach is someone that you pay for specific skills, but you can't ask someone to be your sponsor. You need to be visible. You need to be in that habit of kind of talking about what you do, how well you've done it, the ideas that you've got, and be kind of comfortable with sharing. Not everything, but the achievements that you're making, the things that you're thinking through. And if you just have mentors and you don't have sponsors, there's a big limit on how you can grow, how you can progress, and how things happen. You can't promote yourself. Right? You need a sponsor. A sponsor then is the person that represents you in your promotion panels. There are lots of awards, lots of things that might happen for your growth that you can't do yourself. And so empowering people to be sponsors for you, in addition to having mentors to check things against, is probably kind of the number one piece of advice I always give people. But you have to be visible for that sponsor to sponsor you. You can't ask someone to be your sponsor.
What should they look for in a good mentor or good sponsor?
So there's nothing you can look for in a good sponsor, I guess. It's someone who probably has a little bit more power and agency than you. But you've got to recognize when someone's sponsoring you and say yes. So it's the same thing. If anyone's ever asked you to do something where you're like, gosh, I could never do that, that person is probably sponsoring you. So it's anyone that's giving you an opportunity where you're like, oh God, really, me? Be like, yeah, that person's sponsoring you. In terms of a mentor, someone that you trust, someone that you respect. Because if you don't respect them, then you're wasting your time and their time.
Right. Sue, big tips.
Finally, I get to talk. I would say don't get stuck. I think it's quite easy to get stuck in situations, in companies, in groups of people where you're not happy, where in an environment where you're not valued, where people aren't being that nice to you. You may be in a job where you're getting some shit from somebody. You said shit, so I'm going to say shit as well. And, you know, I've been in that situation several times in my life. And I think if there's one thing I've learned, kind of like getting to the age that I am now, the career that I've got, it's when I'm in a situation where I think there's kind of shit going on, I just go now. Whereas previously I would have tried to sort it out, maybe possibly for years. I just think now, if you're in an environment that doesn't appreciate you, then just move on and kind of keep going, because if you're in that sort of environment, you can't be yourself, you can't do your best work, you can't be your best self, and you need to go somewhere where you're appreciated. And I think as girls, as women, we're brought up to try and, you know, we've got to sort out everything around us. Whereas actually, particularly if you're working in a company, unless you're the CEO, and sometimes even if you are the CEO, you can't sort all of that stuff out. So if you're not in a good place, I think just move on.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the floor. We do have some microphones out there. We've got time for one question? We've got time for one question.
Better be a good one.
We've got a hand up down here.
Hi, Anne-Marie, you mentioned earlier how we've already worked on improving women and now we need to start working on improving the environment. So what do you think are some of the key things that companies can start doing to improve the environment?
So lots. So I think Dorothee mentioned a couple of things that are being done at Credit Suisse. There are lots of things that you look at recruitment. There are things to do in terms of how you recruit people, even with internal moves, the bias that you've got in those in the panels that you have that look at recruitment, things around promotions, and even just your the kind of the words that you use when you're doing promotion panels. You know, you kind of submit to the promotion panel, but also when you do your reviews at the end of the year, kind of looking at the language that people are using. I always kind of, I mean, obviously in this audience it might be different, but I always end up asking audiences, how many of you have been called bossy before? Hands up if you've been called bossy. And it's like, okay, cool. You know, if we had any men, none of the men at the back of the room put their hands up to say they were called bossy. So there's all these things where you can look at the social norms that you have. From Caroline's book, I don't know if she spoke about it this morning, but things like expenses. So if any of you have read the book, there's an example towards the end that talks about a woman who's a director at a company, and they've called the director's dinner. And so they've said, okay, cool, you know, whoever can come to the dinner, come along to the dinner. In the US or in the UK, about 80 or 90% of single parents are women. And so whereas this woman's colleagues, who are all directors, are men, and kind of look up whether they're free that evening, they book themselves into the hotel next door. This woman has to check whether the babysitter is free and books the babysitter, and that's how she's able to go for the dinner. And then asks the question, the hotel is probably an expense. Is the babysitter an expense? And so there's small things like that to look at and say, you know, what are the times that we're doing social events for our teams? Do we do everything in the evening when some people might be on the school run or might have other things to do? Can we put them in the morning? Should we do them during the work day? I think the biggest thing that companies need to do is to understand what good management looks like. So this is the other thing I get asked all the time. Having networks and affinity networks is fantastic, but if you're not listening to them, and if you're not responding to the problems that you're hearing, it's useless. So there's a big tech company I did a talk at a couple of years ago, and their CTO came up to me afterwards and said, you know, that's all great, and you know, I'm involved in our women's network and I sponsor it, yada, 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 but I've got, you know, certain problems. And so he told me about one problem where there was a woman in this tech team who had some kind of jokes being made, or kind of sexism that she'd experienced in kind of the bants within the team. And how he then made the decision to move her out of the team. And I was like, okay, cool, that's an interesting way to resolve that problem. She was the person that was kind of on the receiving end of this, and your decision was to take her out of that team. You know, where was her manager in all of this? Who was allowing that to be something that was part of their culture? Turns out it was the manager that was making the sexist remarks. And then you've got to think, okay, cool. So it was the manager making those remarks. She then complained. You believed her, but she didn't want to go with the process because we've all been there before, right? And then what you did was you moved her out of the team. Rather than saying the manager is the problem, we're going to work with that person. I've ended up recently saying we should just fire some of these people because they're getting in the way of progress. And actually, at the end of the day, it's kind of what we're going to need to do. So I think we have to kind of make sure that we're looking at the problems that we have in our organisation slightly differently, where we're working on the people who are the perpetrators, but working on our norms more than anything else. It's a long answer.
Really, so actually, we make no apologies. We have overrun, but that's what happens when you have such a fantastic panel. Could we please have, before I let them go, I dare say, if you do have some questions that really needed answering that you weren't able to pose just now, you can maybe try and catch the ladies before they leave today. You may have to sprint after them because I hear they're pretty quick. But before they go, could I please have a massive round of applause for our panelists, for Dorothee, for Jacqueline, for Anne-Marie and for Sue. Thank you very much.